Historically, the biggest obstacle to getting mental health care wasn't actually your diagnosis. It was your zip code.
Oh, absolutely. Geography was everything.
Right. I mean, if you lived in the wrong county or you couldn't afford a massive out-of-pocket fee, or even if you just couldn't stomach the thought of someone seeing your car parked outside a therapist's office.
The system essentially just locked you out entirely.
Exactly. But today, we're doing a deep dive into something really fascinating. For you listening, whether you're in healthcare, business, or just curious about human psychology, this one is super relevant.
It really is.
We are looking at a single promotional text from a telehealth practice down in Georgia. They're called Coping and Healing Counseling, or CHC. And our mission today is to unpack how this one really short text serves as a literal masterclass in how modern medicine is dismantling those exact barriers we just talked about.
Yeah, it's like a blueprint. When you analyze the structural shifts happening in mental health delivery right now, you start to see that the traditional model was, well, inherently exclusionary.
Right, you had to have a car.
You had to have the transportation to get to a specific building, the flexibility with your job to go at a specific time, and honestly, the social capital to feel comfortable walking into a clinical waiting room.
Yeah, that waiting room anxiety is real.
Oh, very real. And what this text from CHC outlines is just a complete inversion of that old model. It takes the clinical infrastructure and distributes it directly into the patient's existing environment.
So let's look at the literal map first, because the geographical scale they're talking about here is massive.
It's the whole state.
Right. The very first thing the text highlights is that CHC serves all 159 counties in Georgia.
Which is huge.
I mean, they're utilizing a 100% telehealth model, secure IPA-compliant video sessions.
Yeah.
But then, to manage this massive statewide footprint, they list a staff of 15-plus licensed therapists.
And they don't just say therapists, which I think is a vital detail.
Oh, right. They break down the specific credentials, like licensed clinical social workers, licensed professional counselors, and licensed marriage and family therapists.
Breaking down those credentials explains the functional capacity of the practice. They aren't just deploying a monolith of generalists.
Right.
Like a licensed clinical social worker, an LCSW, they are trained to look at a patient's entire environment, their economic situation, community support, systemic barriers.
Which is super important if you're suddenly reaching out into rural areas.
Exactly. And a licensed marriage and family therapist focuses explicitly on relationship dynamics within a household. So, by distributing this specific mix of specialists across 159 counties, they ensure that a patient in a remote area isn't just getting generic counseling.
They're getting the exact same highly specialized care as someone sitting in a high-rise in downtown Atlanta.
Precisely. It completely eliminates the urban-rural divide.
Okay, let's unpack this a bit, because it's like the transition from the local video store to streaming, but for mental health.
That's a great way to put it.
Like suddenly your local clinic is statewide. You used to just be limited to whatever VHS tapes were physically sitting on the shelf in your small town.
Right, whatever therapist happened to have an office within 20 miles.
Exactly. But looking at these numbers, 15-plus therapists covering 159 counties, that raises a bit of a red flag for me.
How so?
Well, that sounds incredibly stretched. Does advertising a footprint this massive with a core team of 15 clinicians risk diluting the quality of care? Or does it just highlight the raw efficiency of telehealth?
It's the efficiency. To understand how that scale actually works without diluting care, we have to look at the mechanical bottlenecks of traditional therapy.
Okay, like scheduling.
Exactly. In a physical office, a therapist's schedule is incredibly fragile. Say a patient cancels at the last minute, that hour is just lost.
Because you can't get someone else to drive to the office in 10 minutes.
Right. The geographic radius is too small to instantly fill the slot. Furthermore, a specialist in a rural area might not have a dense enough local population to sustain a full-time practice focusing solely on, say, severe trauma.
Oh, that makes sense. There just aren't enough patients with that specific need in a 10-mile radius.
Exactly. Telehealth removes that geographic friction entirely. A clinician can see a patient from the northern mountains at 10 a.m. and then fill a sudden cancellation at 11 a.m. with a patient from the southern coast.
Wow.
So the 159 county reach doesn't mean those 15 therapists are treating millions of people simultaneously. It means their specialized time is perfectly optimized and distributed.
Okay, so the scale is actually a mechanism for keeping the therapist fully utilized without those geographic dead zones.
Precisely.
But covering all those counties creates a secondary problem. Like, how do you price a service that spans both super affluent suburban areas and economically distressed rural communities without alienating either of them?
Because expanding the map is totally useless if the service remains financially out of reach.
Right. Which brings us to the financial equation in the source. And they're very explicit here. They state that Medicaid patients have a $0 copay.
That is a massive detail.
It is. And then for patients with commercial insurance, they list Aetna, Cigna, Blue Cross Blue Shield, United Healthcare, Humana. The sessions cost between $10 and $40.
Unpacking the significance of those exact numbers is really important. By listing $0 and $10 to $40 right up front alongside these massive corporate acronyms like BCBS and UHC,
Yeah.
they are aggressively countering the historical assumption about therapy. For decades, therapy has been passively marketed as a luxury good.
Oh, absolutely. Like something you only do if you have a ton of disposable income.
Right. By standardizing these numbers, the practice is signaling that mental health support is not a premium lifestyle add-on. It's routine, accessible healthcare.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening, though. Because $10 to $40 is, what, the cost of a Tuesday night takeout order? Or like a couple of streaming subscriptions?
It's highly relatable.
Right. But I have to ask a critical question here. By leading with these incredibly low numbers, is this source text actively attempting to reclassify mental health from a medical expense to just a routine monthly budget item? And does that risk cheapening it?
Like people might think it's lower quality because it's cheap.
Yeah, exactly. When people see specialized medical care advertised that cheaply, they often assume the quality is compromised.
The psychology of healthcare pricing actually operates on a totally different axis. When patients hear the phrase medical expense, their cognitive load just spikes.
Oh, totally. You expect the worst.
Right, they anticipate surprise billing, confusing out-of-network fees, potential debt, and that anxiety alone acts as a massive deterrent. It stops people from ever making the initial appointment.
So the low price point diffuses that anxiety.
Exactly. By framing the cost as $20, you shift the mental accounting. It moves therapy from the terrifying emergency medical fund category right into the routine monthly budget category, like a gym membership.
That makes total sense from the patient's perspective. But let's look at the business mechanics for a second. How does a medical practice actually sustain itself, let alone turn a profit, while accepting $0 Medicaid copays and $10 commercial rates?
Because historically, private practices actively avoid Medicaid.
Right. The reimbursement rates are notoriously low, and the administrative burden is super high.
The answer lies entirely in the overhead structure of the telehealth model. Think about a traditional brick-and-mortar clinic. It requires commercial real estate.
Which means rent, property taxes, utilities.
Liability insurance, you have to furnish a waiting room, you have to hire front desk staff to manage the physical flow of patients.
And all of those fixed costs have to be absorbed by the patient's hourly rate.
Exactly. But when you transition to a 100% virtual model using secure digital infrastructure, those massive physical overhead costs just vanish.
Wow.
The margin of operation becomes much wider. That allows the practice to accept lower reimbursement rates from Medicaid and keep out-of-pocket copays low for commercial insurance while still running a sustainable business.
It's literally the physical real estate that artificially inflates the cost of traditional care.
That's exactly it.
So you remove the building and you remove the financial gatekeeping. But, okay, even if you solve the map and even if you solve the financial equation, human fear often still stops people from seeking help.
Stigma.
Yes, the stigma and visibility. And the text hits this core psychological barrier with surprising directness. It literally poses the question, quote, but what if someone sees me go into therapy?
Which is the silent barrier for so many people.
And their answer is just, with telehealth, nobody sees anything.
Right.
They promise no waiting room awkwardness, no explaining your car in a parking lot, no bumping into your neighbor's cousin.
The neighbor's cousin effect is such a real thing.
Right. And they even suggest specific physical spaces for a session. They say the living room, the bedroom, or your car, wherever feels safe.
Highlighting that neighbor's cousin effect demonstrates a deep understanding of rural and suburban social dynamics. In a traditional clinical setting, the physical architecture is honestly a vulnerability trap.
A vulnerability trap, I like that phrasing.
Well, think about it. You have to park in a public lot. You walk into a building where everyone knows exactly why you were there. You sit in a waiting room, usually under terrible fluorescent lights, trying to avoid eye contact.
Wondering who might recognize you.
Exactly. The patient is placed in a position of high anxiety long before they even meet the therapist.
It's an inherently defensive posture. Contrast that with taking a therapy session in your parked car. It's the modern-day equivalent of the secret diary, but interactive.
Oh, that's a brilliant way to look at it.
Thanks. You are entirely in control of the environment. But I have to push you on this. Does the fact that a practice has to heavily advertise "nobody sees anything" highlight a fundamental failure in our society's acceptance of mental health?
It does point to a deep societal issue, yes.
Like, are we inadvertently reinforcing the idea that therapy is shameful and needs to be hidden by doing this? Or is it just a pragmatic solution?
That is the tension right there. It's public health idealism versus clinical pragmatism. In an ideal world, walking into a therapist's office for severe depression would carry no more social weight than going to physical therapy for a torn ACL.
But we aren't in that world yet.
No, we aren't. The fact that complete invisibility is a major selling point confirms that the social stigma is still intensely powerful. However, from a clinical standpoint, your primary directive is to treat the patient in front of you today.
Right, you can't wait for society to evolve before you offer help.
Exactly. If the paralyzing fear of being spotted in a waiting room is the single factor preventing someone from processing severe trauma, then digitizing that waiting room out of existence is the most effective intervention.
You treat the reality of the patient's environment.
Yes, and the text emphasizes this perfectly. It says, "Your healing is your business." It transfers the locus of control entirely back to the individual.
Which is so empowering. So, okay, once the patient is safely situated in their virtual room, whether it's their bedroom or their car, who are they talking to and what are they talking about? Let's move to the actual clinical interaction.
The scope of practice.
Right. The CHC text details a very specific clinical scope. They have a diverse, culturally competent team offering individual, couples, family, and teen therapy for ages 13 and up, as well as life coaching.
And look at the specialties they list.
Yeah, it's heavy stuff. Anxiety, depression, trauma, PTSD, grief, relationships, and stress.
Connecting the idea of a culturally competent team to a 100% telehealth model is really important here.
Awesome.
Well, when you treat complex psychological issues like trauma, PTSD, or profound grief, the physical presence of the therapist traditionally acts as an anchor.
Oh, like they can hand you a tissue or adjust their body language?
Exactly. They utilize subtle physical cues to build trust. Through a screen, a portion of that physical data is lost. So cultural competence becomes the bridge that closes that physical distance.
That makes a lot of sense.
It ensures the therapist possesses a deep, nuanced understanding of the patient's background, their societal pressures, their lived experience. When treating trauma remotely, that shared cultural shorthand establishes the psychological safety you need for deep clinical work.
Okay, I see how that works for individual therapy. But what does this all mean when we talk about teens and families?
Group dynamics are fascinating on telehealth.
Because managing a volatile couple on the brink of divorce or trying to pull answers out of a moody 13-year-old over a video call seems infinitely more complex than having everyone sit on a single physical couch.
It does seem that way, but the dynamic actually shifts, often in ways that are clinically advantageous.
Really? How does it shift a couple session?
Well, take a physical honest. The environment is neutral, but it's also artificial, and physical proximity on a single small couch can actually escalate conflict. The tension can be palpable.
So what does telehealth offer instead?
Unique structural interventions. A couple can sit together on their own couch in their native environment where the conflicts actually happen. This gives the therapist a real-time window into their home dynamic.
And if they are super angry at each other?
If the situation is highly volatile, the therapist can have the couple log in from separate rooms within the same house.
Oh, wow. Using separate rooms as a physical buffer is brilliant. It's a built-in de-escalation tool.
Exactly. You can still communicate face-to-face through the screen, but the physical threat or intense energy in the room is completely neutralized.
Okay, that's couples. What about teenagers? How do you get a 13-year-old to engage through a laptop?
For an adolescent, the digital screen isn't a barrier. It's their native environment.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
They practically live on screens.
Yes. Forcing a 13-year-old to sit in a sterile medical office with an unfamiliar adult almost guarantees they will shut down. The traditional power dynamic is entirely skewed in the adult's favor there.
But on a screen.
When you allow that teenager to sit in their own bedroom, surrounded by their own belongings, wearing their own headphones, interacting through a device they control, it completely flips the power dynamic.
They feel safe.
The screen acts as a psychological shield. Paradoxically, by giving them the safety of a physical barrier, they often feel secure enough to be much more emotionally vulnerable than they ever would in a physical office.
That is so counterintuitive, but it makes perfect sense. So looking at the big picture for you listening, CHC's model really represents a deliberate three-pronged attack on the traditional barriers to therapy.
Absolutely. First, they overcome geographic isolation by leveraging their team across all 159 counties.
Erasing the map.
Second, they eliminate financial gatekeeping by using the low overhead nature of telehealth to sustain $0 Medicaid copays and $10 to $40 commercial rates.
And third, they engineer absolute privacy. They shift the clinical encounter into the parked car or the bedroom, erasing the anxiety of the physical waiting room.
It's a striking example of how adapting the delivery mechanism can fundamentally alter who gets access to care.
It really is. By the way, for your own notes, based on the source material we reviewed, their website is ch-etherapy.com.
And their email is support@ch-ctherapy.com.
Right. And they list their phone number as area code 404-832-0102.
It's great that all of this is so accessible.
It really is. But as we close out this deep dive, we want to leave you with a final, lingering question to ponder on your own.
Something that builds on this promise of absolute privacy we've been talking about.
Exactly. If telehealth allows therapy to become completely invisible, hidden safely away in bedrooms and parked cars, will that actually prevent society from ever truly normalizing it in public? Will the stigma remain forever, simply because we have engineered the perfect technological way to hide it?